Israel says the man it killed in Tehran was the commander of the oil headquarters for Iran's forces. If that is what he was, then this was not a strike on a title or a desk. It was a strike on the place where oil stops being revenue and starts becoming war. That would sound like pure wartime messaging, if his name had not already been sitting inside a sanctions file. Jamshid Eshaghi was identified there as the Armed Forces General Staff Budget Chief and a former Sapir Energy official. Same man, same hidden lane where oil money and military money touch each other. Then Tehran confirmed he was dead. Ahmad Vahidi issued a condolence message for Jamshid Eshaghi as the head of budget and financial affairs at Iran's Armed Forces General Staff, which means the core fact is over. A senior military finance operator is gone. The real fight now is over what his death means. If you want the layer governments buried under the headline, subscribe now and drop one word in the comments, artery or actor, because this whole story changes depending on whether Israel hit the system or just one man inside it. By the time this killing surfaced, Tehran was already living inside the energy war. Oil depots and refineries around the city had been hit hard enough to send thick black smoke over the capital, turning fuel infrastructure into fear, poison, and pressure. That matters because this man did not die in some calm bureaucratic background. He died while oil itself was already under attack. That is where the title gets its teeth. Tehran's oil chief is not the clean public version of this story. It is the ruthless version. It tells the viewer, fast and correctly, that this was not just another senior official. This was a man near the machinery that helps keep the regime lethal. Officially, he served as head of budget and financial affairs at the Armed Forces General Staff, the body coordinating between the regular army and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. That is not a decorative posting. It places him close to the nerve center, where money allocation shapes what gets built, what gets funded, and what keeps moving when the war gets expensive. So the title is doing what strong YouTube titles are supposed to do. It is compressing a hidden role into a plain English truth. The man was not oil in the civilian sense. He was oil in the wartime sense, where barrels, budgets, and battlefield endurance meet. And this was not one clean hit with no surrounding pattern. A separate strike was also described as hitting a central headquarters in Tehran, used to manage budgets for security bodies and fund military operations and allied armed groups. That means the money layer was not just exposed by one death. It was being hunted as a category. Now the question becomes unavoidable. Did Israel just hit the regime where it hurts most? Or did it simply find one important man inside a structure built to survive important men dying? That question is the whole runtime. Because if the answer is the first one, the war just moved into the regime's bloodstream. If the answer is the second, the regime may be even harder than it looks. The reason Israel can even make the phrase war profits sound credible is right here. Jamshid Eshaghi had already been tied to a network accused of moving millions of barrels of Iranian crude worth hundreds of millions of dollars to China. That is not vague corruption. That is large-scale covert revenue. And that is exactly the kind of revenue a regime leans on when it wants to fight, arm, suppress, and endure. That is the click reason. The viewer did not come here for a funeral notice. The viewer came here to find out whether the man who died was one of the people helping convert hidden oil revenue into regime power, and the answer is strong enough to make the title feel earned. Yes, that is the lane he was sitting in. War profits, in a story like this, do not mean somebody getting rich in a cartoonish back room. They mean a state under sanctions still finding ways to turn oil into capability. They mean barrels becoming payroll, procurement, logistics, proxy funding, and time. Time is one of the most important currencies in war. If you can keep buying time, you can keep fighting. And the regime did not build this under fire last week. It spent years building an illicit network of shell companies, banks, and exchange houses to keep money moving under sanctions pressure. That means Eshaghi was not sitting inside a temporary workaround. He was sitting inside a long-developed survival architecture that cuts both ways. And that is what makes this story dangerous instead of simple. On one side, a hidden network makes men like this more valuable than they look, because they understand how the money actually moves. On the other side, a hidden network is built precisely so the machine can take losses and keep going. So yes, redundancy matters, but redundancy is not immunity. The moment a covert finance operator moves from a sanctions list to a death notice, every person connected to the same pipeline has to rethink his risk. The money may still move, but it moves through hands that are suddenly less steady. That is the part official statements rarely say out loud. Networks like this do not run only on access. They run on confidence. Confidence that the names stay buried. Confidence that the documents are deniable. Confidence that the quiet men in charge of routing the money are not physically targetable. That confidence just took a hit whether the cash flow stopped or not. And that is why the opening of this story cannot be safe. Safe would be another sanctioned official killed. The real opening is uglier. Israel is trying to show that the men who helped turn oil into war are no longer behind the curtain. The timing makes that even more explosive. Israel also attacked South Pars, Iran's main energy source, and infrastructure at the nearby Azaluyat processing hub, prompting attacks on energy targets across the region. So this was not just a war against launchers and commanders anymore. It was already becoming a war against the systems that feed state power. That matters because once energy enters the center of the war, finance comes with it. Hit a missile launcher and you interrupt fire. Hit a military budget node linked to covert oil money and you interrupt something more dangerous. The regime's ability to keep replacing what gets destroyed. This is where the script has to keep widening, because the story keeps widening. First you think this is about one man. Then you realize it is about one office. Then one network. Then the energy base underneath that network. Then the realization hits. This war is moving toward the hidden infrastructure of endurance. And endurance is the real prize here. Not headlines. Not even symbolism. Endurance, the side that can keep paying, producing, rerouting and absorbing pain the longest, shapes the next phase of the war. Iran's answer to that pressure has not depended on winning cleanly in the sky. The widening war has halted oil tankers, turned refineries into targets, and spread enough market fear to create cascading economic pain. That is a strategy in itself. If Tehran cannot stop every strike, it can still make the cost of continuing those strikes harder for everyone else to carry. That is why this story is bigger than one dead official in Tehran. It sits inside a contest over cost. Israel wants to show that the regime's hidden war finance operators can be found and removed. Iran wants to show that even while those operators are hunted, the broader price of war can still be pushed onto the region and the world. One side is saying, we can get inside your machine. The other is saying, maybe, but we can still shake the whole board. And hanging over all of this is the hardest piece of leverage Tehran still has. The Strait of Hormuz was described as effectively a parking lot, with tankers avoiding a waterway that carries around 20% of global oil and LNG exports. So even if Israel lands a real hit on the regime's internal cash machinery, Iran can still threaten the outside artery the world depends on. That contradiction is the deepest truth in the whole title. Israel can show reach into Tehran's hidden financial layer. Iran can still show leverage over regional energy pressure points. One side can hunt the operators. The other can still weaponize the environment those operators were helping to exploit. So did the regime's war profits just take a brutal hit? The honest answer is yes in one sense, and not yet proven in another. Yes. Because a documented military finance figure tied to covert oil-linked activity is dead, and his death was folded into a wider campaign against finance nodes and energy systems. Not yet proven, because there is still no public proof that the revenue network itself froze the night he died. But that is exactly why the title still works. A brutal hit is not the same thing as a fatal hit. A brutal hit can be exposure. A brutal hit can be fear. A brutal hit can be the moment everyone inside the same pipeline realizes the people managing the money are now inside the kill chain too. That kind of hit changes behavior before it changes headlines. It raises friction. It raises mistrust. It forces rerouting. It makes every quiet operator wonder whether his paperwork is already a target package waiting for the right night. And if you are Tehran, that is a problem. Maybe not a collapse problem. Maybe not an immediate stop the war problem. But absolutely a survivability problem. Because hidden systems stay strongest when they stay boring. This one just stopped being boring. That is also why a lazy script would fail this story. A lazy script would tell you either Israel crippled everything or nothing changed. Both are too dumb for what actually happened. Something changed. The proof is the man, the role, the prior sanctions trail, and the surrounding strikes on the money layer. Now we come back to the central question and answer it the hard way. If Israel really did cut into a core revenue artery, then the implication is severe. The regime's war machine has entered a new phase where the financial managers of endurance can be hunted like battlefield commanders. That makes every future covert transfer more dangerous. If Israel did not inflict lasting structural damage, the implication is still severe. It means Tehran built a war finance architecture, resilient enough to lose a documented operator tied to covert oil revenue, and still keep functioning. That does not make the strike meaningless. It makes the system more chilling. Either way, the viewer should leave with the same conclusion in the gut. This war is no longer only about missiles, air defenses, and assassination lists. It is about conversion. About whether Iran can keep turning hidden oil money into military power, while the people who help make that conversion happen are being found and killed. That is the deeper layer. Official statements try not to explain too clearly. Because once the public sees the war in those terms, the meaning of every future strike changes. A blast in Tehran is no longer just a blast. It might be a message about money. A death notice is no longer just a death notice. It might be a sign that the state's hidden cash machinery is now exposed to physical attack. And once that line has been crossed, there is no clean way back to the old story. You cannot pretend this is only a war of visible weapons after the hidden financiers of endurance start turning up dead. So here's the final answer. Straight. The title promises real if you understand it correctly. Israel says it killed a man tied to the place where oil money fed the military state, and the available evidence is strong enough to show that was not an invented role. What is still open is scale. Whether this was a wound to the network or a wound to the network plus the beginning of wider financial shock. But even that uncertainty should disturb the viewer, not calm him. Because if one man like this mattered, then the regime's war economy is more personal than it looks. And if one man like this did not matter enough to break it, then the regime's war economy is even deeper than most people want to admit. That is a part that should stay in the mind after the screen goes dark. Not just that Jamshid Ishaqi is dead, but that a state built to hide how it funds conflict just had one of its hidden money men dragged into the front line and killed there. Stay here, because this channel follows the hidden machinery of power long after the official story runs out.